What is up, guys, and welcome back. My name is Billy, and for those of you who don't know, I am a beginner filmmaker. Currently, I do weddings. I enjoy doing weddings. They are fun. I get to see different places all the time. But one of the things I struggle with is the proper gear to have. And sometimes YouTube videos out there can tell you everything that you possibly need. And then sometimes they're straighting you on a path of the most expensive and best gear out there. And while having that is incredible, and be able to have your $3,500 to $4,000 Sony bodies with the best autofocus in the world, that's the best things you could ever ask for. But for some people, when you first get started, that is impossible. There's no way to actually do that without having, hopefully, a major investor behind you, which for the most part, if you're doing wedding films, you're not gonna have that. So today we're gonna talk about a camera that I absolutely love. I started out on Panasonic Lumix with the micro four thirds bodies. If you've seen any of the videos on my channel, you know that I have videos on the G85 and the GH5 Mark II. And today we're gonna be talking about a camera that I didn't think I was gonna get because I already had its older, better brother, or I'm sorry, rather younger, better brother. And that is the Lumix S5 original. Now, there are a number of reasons why I picked this camera up. One, I couldn't afford another S5 Mark II. And I couldn't afford what I really kind of want is an S5 Mark IIX. Now, with that being said, I wanted to find something that could match my cameras well. The GH5 Mark II is already a bit of a struggle. The image quality isn't as good as the S5 II, and it obviously surpassed the G85. That is a camera I really needed to replace. Both of those micro four thirds cameras struggle in low light, but for the most part, they do get the job done. The GH5 Mark II is one of my favorite cameras I've ever had, exceeded my expectations, and sent me on the kind of journey that I am on at the time. So with the S5 original, when I was doing some research, I knew that that was a possibility. By no means is it as good as the S5 Mark II, but it is still an extremely capable camera in 2024. With this camera, you're able to get a lot of different features that we're going to go over today, but I want to just highlight some of my favorites. The thing is a lot of people have things out there that they're going to talk about, and everybody has the same exact response to these cameras. But I want to let you guys know how I feel as somebody that actually uses this on a day-to-day. This is not a loaner. This was purchased with my own money. I use it every time I go out on a wedding shoot. I can tell you guys what I use it for and be able to help you guys get a real feel for how this camera functions when you're out and you're trying to film things. Now, what I have with me today is a notebook, because what I want to do is make sure I tell you guys exactly how I feel and not just try to shoot from the hip. Typically with these videos, I'm not scripted or anything like that, but this is kind of an overview of this camera. So if you see me looking at this or you see me with this notebook, my apologies. Just want to be real with you guys. One of the things about this camera compared to the S5 Mark II is that it doesn't have the new phase hybrid detect autofocus. With that, it's still using contrast-based detection, and for a lot of people, that is a no-go. It is deal over, don't want it, because the Sonys have the best, Canon is great, some of the Nikons are out there killing it with the autofocus, and you have the S5 Mark II that has a new phase detect autofocus. With this, I don't struggle as much as other people do. Now, one thing you can obviously do is set it to manual focus, and that will help you. But for the most part, if you've got plenty of contrast areas and you set the autofocus correctly, which is the one area plus mode on these cameras, and if you like, I could do a settings video and show you exactly how I have it set up. Let me know down in the comments below if you guys want to see exactly what I do with these. But for now, again, we're just kind of highlighting some of the key features that I love about this camera. With that autofocus, I'm able to capture exactly what I need throughout the day. This is typically my bride cam when we are set up for a ceremony, and it is also my B cam that my second shooter will typically have with him to be able to go and shoot grooms getting ready. He's able to get details with this as far as like table details, venue details, anything like that. He's got all the detailed shots with these. And then as a second backup to anything else I need for like speeches and first looks, anything like that. This camera excels at all of that, and even in less experienced hands, I have no fear of the autofocus that you're going to be able to do it. Touch autofocus, where you can touch the touch screen and pinpoint exactly where you want it in that one area plus mode, and as long as you stay within that range and you point the camera in that same exact direction, you're going to be able to get pretty good autofocus. Now, in low light situations, it obviously does struggle. It kind of hunts quite a bit. Depending on what's going on in the scene, there is hunting going on, but I find that in a lot of cameras, and when you pair it with the right lens, it definitely helps. Typically, I got the same lens that I'm shooting on today, which is my Lumix S5ii 50mm. It's a 1.7, so even with that, it doesn't do bad. In my opinion, I think it's great. It's something that I am very, very happy with. Very, very capable of being able to get the job done. Now, one of the other great things about this camera is its image quality. You get a full vlog profile within this camera. Same thing I'm shooting on today with the S5 II. You're gonna get that exact thing out of this camera. It goes all the way up to C4K, which is a cinema 4K, or I guess some people say it's DCI. Again, I'm a beginner, so I'm learning just like you are. And you're able to get kind of a 17:9 aspect ratio, so a little bit wider than you would on the typical 16:9, which is probably what you're watching this in today. With that, I'm able to get all the way up to 60 frames a second with a slight crop. A lot of people complain about the crop, but again, I'm coming from Micro Four Thirds. The crop does not bother me at all. It is still far less of a crop than you would in a Micro Four Thirds setting. So just move back. A lot of people complain about it. I understand when you're paying quite a bit of money for these cameras, you want it to work exactly how you want it to work. So again, 4K 60 on this. You got 4K 24, which is what I typically shoot in for a good portion of the wedding day. And then you have some 1080 features. We can get a little higher frame rates or like a variable frame rate out of this, but I don't really use that. 4K 60 is plenty for me. And even with that slight crop, no issues with it. I needed something that was gonna match that S5 II. So with the full vlog profile on this already, I'm able to match up exactly with the S5 II in settings that I'm gonna use at, but for the most part in wedding days, I use a natural picture profile. I set these cameras up identical to each other, and I'm able to film and get almost identical results in the end with these. Again, the only thing that really struggles is that autofocus. So outside of that, these cameras match up very well. This camera has incredible image quality. When you compare this to my GH5 Mark II, or even some of the more expensive cameras out there, this takes a kick. Love Panasonic's color science. A lot of people, that's exactly why they love Lumix. That's why the S5 II is one of the most popular cameras of today, because they added the better autofocus to the S5 II, and then you match it up with color science. Who wouldn't want this camera? Now, for the S5 original, again, you just kind of have to play with it. A lot of people that want to go out there and make cool things anyways, they might be using some cheaper cinema lenses or some anamorphic, which this camera also does. And at that point, you're going to have to manually focus it anyways. But again, never mind about the autofocus. We already know it is absolutely usable, contrary to popular belief. One of the great things about this camera, and for any Lumix camera out there that at least I've never heard of, these things don't overheat. I don't know why anybody would buy a camera that is susceptible to overheating. I'm not going to do that. That's one of the reasons I picked up my very first Panasonic Lumix camera. Had unlimited record time. It did not overheat. I'm going to be doing a video on the this Ninja Shinobi, I believe it's called. They're terrible. My screen just fell. Give me 1 minute. Back to where we were. No overheating on this camera. Don't buy a camera that overheats. It's pointless. No overheating. There are some drawbacks and some ways that Lumix kind of gets around that. We'll get to that in just a moment. One of the other reasons I picked this up is, as I had stated with the Micro Four Thirds, they're not very good in low light. No matter what you do, the best that's out there is a Lumix G9 Mark II. It has a dual native ISO, so you can kind of crank that up a little bit, pair it with a fast lens. You can get some decent results in very low light situations. But with this, you also have that same dual native ISO as you would on the S5 Mark II, which is 640 and 4000 in the vlog profile. With that being said, there are a lot of charts out there that tell you in your different picture profiles what you can set that ISO to. I can tell you right now that even in the natural picture profile, when I go shoot weddings, I shoot up to 4000 ISO and I don't have any issues with noise or image quality issues. It looks just as good as it did when there was plenty of light inside. So for dancing and stuff like that, again, if I don't like the reception or people have an issue with it, I'm able to film just fine at 4,000 with both of these cameras and have no issues whatsoever. Again, pair it with a faster lens, like a 1.7, some of these S primes, or even sometimes my 24-70 2.8. I have no issues with it. Crank it up to 4,000. There are some cases I've even went higher, even closer to 6,000. Introduce a little bit of noise, but nothing that I'm overly concerned with to where I'm like, this image is ruined. It doesn't happen. These cameras are great. I know the Sonys can go up to like 12,000 or something like that in their second dual native. And of course, you know, that's with the FX3, the FX6, so on and so forth. Maybe the A7S III does it as well. That's great, but that's a lot. I mean, you are really bumping that image up, and that means you must be in pitch black to have all that. If I bump these up to 12,000, I'm going to have obviously a ton of noise, but I'm going to be able to see the image just fine. I don't think you need that much. I think the 640 and 4,000 in vlog for sure. And then also, again, in the natural picture profile, I have no issues with either one of those. Very clean, very awesome images. Another great feature about Lumix is they have the best in-body image stabilization that there is on the market. The S5 Mark II is one of the top. The new G9 Mark II Micro Four Thirds camera is the top when it comes to image stabilization. Literally looks like you're on a gimbal. I get very gimbal-like stabilization on the S5 Mark II. And the original S5 is no exception. It's not quite on par with any of those. It's not even really on par with my GH5 Mark II, but it's very close and it's very usable. And sometimes a little camera shake isn't a bad idea. Could be an artistic choice, if you will. I don't have an issue with it. I think it looks great. This is something I'd be comfortable with going out into the field or going out with my children and the family and filming and not worrying about, do I need a gimbal? Do I not need a gimbal? There are, of course, times when you need a gimbal, and I have come to struggle with that. There are a lot of times shooting a wedding, I refuse to set up the gimbal, and then I realized by the end, maybe I should have had a gimbal. But for the most part, if you're smart and you learn some easy techniques with your handheld footage, you're able to get incredibly stable images out of these cameras. And again, the S5 original is no exception to that. Another great thing about this camera, and then we'll get into a few cons, because there are obviously some drawbacks to this camera. The first one obviously being the autofocus. But another fantastic thing about this camera, what Lumix has done with most of their cameras is they give you everything you possibly need to go out and create videos. This is obviously a video first camera and then a photo camera. They are a great hybrid. I believe the sensor on this is 25.6 megapixels or 24 point something megapixels. Takes fantastic photos. I'm not the greatest photographer out there. It's something I'm kind of working on and I'd like to get into, but I was video first. I never really did photos unless I'm using my iPhone. With these, you get some of those awesome cinema features that you won't see on really any other camera out there other than the Lumix cameras or extremely high-end, expensive cinema cameras. You get waveforms on here, so you're able to see your exposure. You get vector scopes, so you can kind of see what's going on there. You also can shoot an anamorphic with these. These have a de-squeeze option built in, so you can actually see what your image is going to look like before you even get to the computer and edit out your footage and de-squeeze it in post. You're able to shoot, I believe, up to 1.5x on this. I could be wrong. It might be 1.3. But either way, you're able to shoot anamorphic on these cameras and be able to easily de-squeeze them in post. But for the most part, you can kind of see what your image is going to look like right away with some functions on the screen to be able to help you actually see what it's going to look like. I think that's absolutely fantastic. You have multiple custom settings. So I've got a C1 through C3, 4K 24, 4K 60. C3 is kind of, let's have some fun. Let's try something else. Let's maybe do a DCI 4K, something like that. Or you could set up, you know, like a photo setup for you if you got some manual settings for that. For the most part, there's literally no issues with buying this camera. One of the best things about this camera that a lot of people don't talk about when it comes in the comparison to the S5 II is the price. I have seen these for as low as $500 to $600 on the used market. And then if not, you can get these for nearly $1,000, $1,300 new, depending on when you're looking. Sometimes there is a promo that you get with a lens. They are still very, very popular, still very, very cheap in comparison to most of those. If you got something like this in the Sony fashion, you're probably looking at $2,500 to $3,000 to get this. Now, Sony has autofocus, of course, but as we said, this autofocus is fine. If not, in a certain situation, it's going to teach you to use manual focus anyway. So what's the problem? I'm terrible with manual focus, but I can still use this camera, get the manual focus locked. No issues whatsoever. And then, as I stated before, this is an extremely capable photo camera. You can go take exceptional images out of this. I believe you can even do up to like 48 megapixel image out of this handheld. They have made some incredible firmware updates regarding that. I haven't used them much because, again, I'm not a photo taker, but you can get a lot done with this. Now, with all that being said, and knowing that it is at an exceptional price point, there are some drawbacks to this, of course. Now, one of the things that keeps being brought up, the autofocus. Again, I don't have an issue with it. It's perfectly fine. I've been dealing with it since the Micro Four Thirds G85, a $600 to $700 camera, new. You can find them used for $300 to $400 with a lens. I've struggled with it, and I have made it work. So for people that have issues with that, I don't understand it. That means that maybe they should take some film classes. I haven't, and I figured it out. Maybe they need it. I don't know what's going on. It's usable. It's not as good as the Phase Detect, but it is absolutely usable. But it is obviously a con of this. There are some times that I've got to go over to my bride cam and I got to fix it up. And I got to make sure that 100% she is still in focus, because it is a major fear of mine when I am filming. So understandably, some people may pass this up because of that, but for the price, you cannot pass it up. Lock it in manual focus. Get it sorted out. The bride's not going to move when she's up there. And as a B cam, you're just kind of floating anyways. Figure it out on whatever shoot you're on. Also still a usable A cam if you really need it. Another con to this camera, and I don't think it's a big deal, but a lot of people have issues with it. You have quite a bit of I/O built into this, but the HDMI is a mini or micro something HDMI. I believe that's micro. It almost looks like it's a micro USB, but it is an HDMI port. And that is kind of frustrating. I have cables because of the G85. I believe it's the same size. I haven't tried it because I don't really use it connected for like streaming or anything like that. Or I haven't even used a monitor yet for it because I don't have a cage or anything to be able to use it yet. But you can use it. It's just obviously the normal size HDMI is the better way to go. It's much easier to get a cable like I have. I'm using a Condor Blue HDMI cable here, and it's fantastic. They're not that expensive, but when you go start adding dongles or get something that has, you know, full size on one side and a micro on the other side, it is kind of a pain. They're not as easy as to find, especially if you want a high quality cable. Make sure you get the high quality image going to your field recorder or whatever you have going on. So that is a con, of course. Does it hurt me? Absolutely not. I still think it's fantastic. And then the last thing with this, compared to the S5 II at least, the S5 II has 6K open gate recording. This does not. Is that going to stop you from purchasing this? I hope not. Because for the most part, you're going to get everything that you could possibly need out of a camera to be able to do short films, weddings, podcasts, whatever you really need to do it for, other than maybe shooting your first full feature film. You're going to be able to do it on this camera. This camera is fantastic. It feels great in the hands. It feels like a very expensive camera, even though, again, we've talked about the price. You can get it to $500 to $1,000. It's fantastic. It has everything, again, that you possibly could need. Not to mention some honorable mentions. You got a full mic input with a decent preamp in there. You've got a headphone jack if you want to monitor your audio. You've got the HDMI, albeit it is a micro HDMI. You've got USB-C on here. You got a dual SD card slot on here that you're able to utilize and actually have everything go to. The screen looks incredible. There are so many menu functions. I've got a button up front that I set for my waveform and vector scope. Again, if you want to see settings, let me know in the comments. If you want to see all the full settings that I use on all of my cameras, we can start to go through those videos. But this is an absolute dream to be able to have, in my opinion, the best camera that came out in 2023 and still probably the best in 2024, paired with this camera that was brought out a number of years ago. I don't even know when it came out. Put it on the screen here. Maybe there's a... Nope, no copyright date on this. I'll put it on the screen here for you guys. This came out a while ago, and it is still, in my opinion, one of the best cameras that you can get in 2024. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel so you can get future updates. There will obviously, I have talked about it. I got very busy in the wedding season this year. I have talked about it though. The plan is to obviously get the S5ii video done and then talk about all the lenses that I use for both of these cameras, possibly even the GH5 Mark II, and a lot of the accessories that I use, like my lighting, my microphones, anything like that. I do want to do videos on those, and I am working hard to get those out so that all beginners can kind of understand what it is like to actually use these and not be the guy who got this on loan, got to test it out and tell you all the great things he loves about it. I appreciate everybody stopping by. If you made it this far, once again, thank you. If you want to see the settings on this, again, comment down below. Let me know. Hope you guys have a great day.